Hello and welcome to another edition of the Gridiron Review. I'm Matt Hurst. Alongside this week, my color commentator partner from the Navy Radio Network, Joe Miller, subbing for Bill Wagner this week. The great news for all of you is Joe has worn closed-toed shoes, so you are in for a treat here today. Good to have you with us, and you and I will talk Navy football coming up here in a little while, and certainly for the Mids. Through two games, not bad here to open the campaign so far.
Yeah, not bad at all. I mean, I don't know how much more you could ask for. Two games where they completely dominated the competition and also getting off to a good start in conference play, which was obviously a big part of their success in years past, and tremendous defensive effort so far in two games. You don't want to get too carried away, but it has really been special watching them play the first couple games of the season because they've looked so good on the offense and defensive side of the football field.
And, of course, for Joe and I, the good news is our next game is in Memphis, Tennessee, a week from Thursday, when the Mids take on Memphis, and that's one of two places in the American Athletic Conference, along with East Carolina, that have some of the best press box food in the nation. Meanwhile, youth football this week, the Pal Hawks and Old Mill got together in a great 7U game, and we don't really talk 7U a whole lot, but when I was going through the scores and the stories of the games this past week, this one stuck out to me because Pal wins the game by a score of 26-25. And normally, if you go back and look at some of the scores we've seen this year, we've seen a lot of blowouts. There have been a lot of routes in a lot of the different age groups. But when you have a game at 7U that is this competitive, it's quite a salute to the coaches for both of these teams and the kids to be able to play such a high-level competitive game this early in the season. And as always, when you need a schedule for any of the youth football championship teams, just go to the Anne Arundel County website at aacounty.org, search team schedules, and you can pull up any football schedule that you want. Joe, the high school schedule this past week, and it's still early in the season, but one thing that is starting to emerge, and we saw this team have some momentum last year qualifying for the playoffs, but Eddie Dolch and the folks at South River really off to a good start. A good week one win, but in my mind, an even better week two win as they took on Meade and David Faust, the quarterback, with a tremendous day for the Seahawks.
Yeah, over 250 yards passing for them in the victory for them. And, look, it started last year with the upset victory over Broadneck, and you were looking at the team coming into the season. Look, they had to change, new running back. They had to change some things, and obviously some new people coming in, but off to a good start. And if you look early in the season, you can't get too carried away with two games in the season, but they look like they might be the class of Anne Arundel County right now.
Yeah, Delvin Johnson, that new running back Joe's talking about, he ran for 90 yards, and he's going to be a key figure to watch as this season goes along for the Seahawks. And right now, getting tremendous balance on the offensive side, being able to both run and pass. Jalen Lampkin had 84 yards and scored on 3 short runs to lead Annapolis over Glen Burnie by a score of 33-7. What a day for Alex Wicks of St. Mary's. 17 carries, 205 yards, and 5 touchdowns against AACS. I don't care who you're playing. That's a heck of a day at the ball yard for Alex Wicks this
Did
past
you have
week.
Your Anne Arundel County fantasy team?
No,
because
Bob Hoke and Catherine Fodick may have had that, maybe Brian Powell, but if you did have Alex Wicks, what a tremendous day. 49-yard run, 31-yard run, scoring on 116 and 2. They get the job done there. Kashawn Gray-Dancer also added 114 yards on 13 carries. And, any level of football is so simple. When you can run the ball and you can keep things so simple, it makes your life so much easier, doesn't it?
It's funny, you talk to college coaches, high school coaches, pro coaches. You want to establish that run. I mean, it's sort of become a little bit passé, but you still want to have that ability because it's the easiest way to churn out yards. It's the easiest way to control the game, and it's the easiest way to keep a lead as well. So when you're trying to win ball games, that becomes a very important factor in it.
Yeah, that's why you see a lot of these spread teams, they go to a bunch of jet sweeps when they're trying to run the football. And running the football doesn't matter. The beauty of football, whether it's triple option, 5 wide, or whatever, it's still running the football. You're just doing it out of different formations. I mean, you and I see a ton of that during the college season. Old Mill gets a nice win. They bounced back. They got beat by Douglas in the opening week. Douglas, the championship contender in Class 2A down in PG County, hammered Old Mill 30-0, but they bounced back and beat Broadneck by a score of 28-12. Karan Tull 137 and 2 scores in that game. Arundel beat Severna Park 27-16. And one of the good developing stories here is North County High School, and I know that is near and dear to your family's heart. John Hardcastle threw 2 touchdowns. North County off to a 2-0 start. This is a school that's kind of taken some lumps here of late. They got rolled by Northeast last year. This week, they turned the tables, winning 42-19. So good to see the 1994 state champions off to a
And
good
who saw
start.
North County 2-0 and Broadneck 0-2 at this point in the season. And it's been a long time since the Bruins have started the season 0-2. Now they have the confidence to kind of turn things around. They're a young team. Yeah, you look at the standings 2 games in, it's a little flip-flop from what you would usually expect to see here early in the season.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Chesapeake continues to win. What a job by Rob Elliott and company. They shut out Randallstown 15-0. Tyler Clark hit Brian Plummer with a touchdown pass. And they've always got great kicking game. They got a punter that's kicking at Maryland right now. Now Blaine Smith with a 36-yard field goal for the winners in that one. Sussex Central gets by Southern by a score of 46-7. The big game on the marquee coming up this week. Not separated by a whole lot of distance. I'm sure our friend Brian Powell will be there. Annapolis taking on South River. When Joe and I come back, we'll take a look at the colleges. Some questionable play calling for the Maryland Terrapins deep in the red zone. And a big win, and Malcolm Perry's improvement continues at the Naval Academy. We'll talk about that when we return on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back. Time to talk colleges. You and I are sitting in the press box watching the game before we did our Navy broadcast with East Carolina. And we know Temple very well. Scotty Montgomery, the offensive coordinator for Maryland, should know Temple very well. But on a key 4th down running play, you run right at their best player, Sean Bradley, and the inevitable result happened. Bradley stops the play for -3, and the drive is over. Give Temple a lot of credit. 3 deep red zone stops against Maryland, where I think when you go back and look at the play calls and the patterns there, Maryland just thought they could come to the line of scrimmage and kind of bash Temple in the face. We know Temple's got some nasty dudes on the defensive
tough for a
side of the
reason,
ball.
yeah.
That's right. They've had tremendous defenses here in the past, and Rod Carey, their new coach, is as good a defensive mind as there is in college football.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at defense in the AAC, they're the one team that has sort of had that covered over the last few years and been consistent in that area is on the defensive side. You mentioned Sean Bradley. They have had a lot of guys gravitate towards the next level, first-round draft picks. Matt Ioannidis with the Redskins, obviously a later-round draft pick. But Temple's tough, as they like to tell you. They like those single-digit numbers at the top of their lineup to tell you the toughest players on the team. But I thought when you looked at the play calling, the drive you're talking about that they go for it on 4th down, they line up an I formation, or offset I, and try to barrel it in. The next time they get inside the 10, they throw it 4 times. So I think it was and granted, there was some time considerations with that last opportunity that were there, but it was the first time that Josh Jackson did not play like an A-plus game.
Right.
And I think that's where you saw Temple being able to not completely shut down the running attack, but hold it into, what you expect to happen. But it was the passing game, and what has been tearing opponents apart those first 2 games was Josh Jackson making plays down the field. And you just didn't see that in the game against Temple. And Temple's wide receivers can make plays, and they made plays in that contest. I'm not by any stretch shocked that Maryland had a tough time with Temple, but when you put all the factors together, that you basically had it ball 3 times inside the 10 to win the game, and you can't do it, you don't want to say it's a bad loss, but it's a loss that when you look down the line, they might be regretting some of those decisions and what happened. And it will be interesting to see as now you kick back into Big Ten play. There was a bunch of enthusiasm for that Penn State game. There will still be that enthusiasm, but it would have been a lot bigger if they would have beat Temple in Philadelphia on Saturday.
Yeah, both teams would have been 3-0 heading into that Friday night contest. Remember, Maryland fans, that is a Friday night game coming up on the 27th. Both teams have a bye week coming up this week. You and I were in Annapolis for Navy and East Carolina. And look, the first game is almost like a preseason game because Navy played a game, then had a week off, and then played the conference opener with ECU. We expected ECU to be better under Mike Houston. He has familiarity with the option. East Carolina's guys you suspected would line up where they're supposed to. But where last year, for whatever reason, Navy did not execute its option at the high level, this year through 2 games, completely different story. And I don't know if it's all necessarily confidence that Malcolm Perry has, but boy, his orchestrating of the offense through 2 games has been exceptional for the midshipmen.
Well, you look at it overall, and there's really not too many criticisms you can lay at the feet of the offense at this point in the season. I thought the offensive line played better in Game 2 than they did in Game 1. I thought you could see a real push at the line of attack that we didn't see a ton against Holy Cross, and you would actually expect it to be a little bit different, FCS versus FBS. So I thought the offensive line had one of their best games, and as we talked about at the conclusion of the game, and head coach Ken Niumatalolo talked about at the end of the game in his press conference, I thought it was one of the most put together, complete performances that Navy's had in a long time. Now, with that said, East Carolina was missing their top running back. He was injured in the game, but there's still bigger fish to fry for this Navy team. But through 2 weeks, I mean, they've been incredibly impressive on both sides of the football field, and Malcolm Perry has done a great job of running the offense at quarterback for them. They've gotten the ball to C.J. Williams a ton, and he's been able to make some big plays for them. But I think all the plaudits and all the sort of excitement, if you're a Navy fan, is on the way. The defensive side of the football field is playing out right now. That not only do you have guys stepping up and performing, you're developing some of that depth that we've talked about in years past, and they're getting to the quarterback. They're getting off the field on third down. And that's what you have in the back of your mind when you talk about how good could this team be going forward. If the defense continues to play like this, they're not going to be able to hold teams under 10 points every week. But if they can get to this point where they're getting off the field at just 50% of the time, as opposed to what we've seen in the past, I think you're looking at a recipe for success.
I think what's been, as fans have watched, if you haven't watched the Navy game this year, literally, they're in previous years, corners are usually playing back and almost conceding out routes to any opposition they have faced. This defense has just been much more aggressive. It's allowed Cameron Kinley and Mikey McMorris out on the corners to be very aggressive in coverage. And they understand, they're going to get beat on some plays. I mean, that's just the nature of the game now. But this is by far the most aggressive we have seen any Navy secondary play probably in a long, long time.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, they've set the tone on the opening drive of each of their games so far this season, bringing pressure, getting to the quarterback. And both corners, McMorris and Kinley, have played well. There's some nice depth there as well. They're using a lot of different players in the defensive backfield. They're going to more nickel and dime stuff, which we haven't seen in the past, and they're having some success. And I think the fact that you're also getting pressure on the quarterback is huge. I do think that when we look at that East Carolina team, the skill positions is probably not as strong as what we've seen in the years past at East Carolina. Yeah. So you do have to take that under consideration. But if they go to Memphis and play like this there, then the expectations start to rise even more for what this defensive unit can do. But through 2 games, there's not a lot of criticism you can have of what they've been able to accomplish so far.
Memphis and Houston expected to be the top teams in the West coming in. Memphis has kind of played to that role, but a little surprising. You and I were texting the other day. Tulane, a 1-point favorite against Houston, who's gotten off to a slow start under Dana Holgorsen, but they have played Oklahoma and Washington State. It's not as if they've been playing directional U or FCS schools. They've lost to 2 really good Power 5 teams. I'm a little surprised by that. I'm not ready to write off Houston in the Western Division as of yet because they've got too good of a quarterback in De'Aaron King, but at least for now, it appears as if Navy now is starting to at least put themselves again in that conversation of what has usually been a very tough Western Division.
Well, I think if you look at what Houston, you got to go back to last year. This is a Houston team that had some success but only won 8 games last season. So I think the reason that they're not as looked upon is because the defense kind of looks like where they were last year, which was pretty bad, and the offense is yet to get going. I'm with you. I think they will start to get going. But I think after 3 weeks of the college football season, as we close in on the first month, I think people in the AAC look at the West right now, and I don't think there's a ton of separation between Tulane, SMU, who we haven't talked about a ton but has played well, Tulane, SMU, Houston, and Navy. I think they look at that and say that's a combination of teams that can do this good, so there's a lot of variables between those 4 teams, and I think going forward, those 4 teams are going to be looked as, pretty much equal going forward, and home field will be one of the big designates on who's the favorite in those clashes. And I think Tulane, they've impressed people with their defense. I think the one question with them is still going to be Justin McMillan at quarterback, and can they run the football well enough? SMU has played great on offense. They've actually done some nice things on defense too. Can they maintain it? And then you look at Houston, they certainly have questions. That's why that Memphis Navy game, it's just a massive game for the AAC West, because if Navy can have some success on the road against Memphis, I think it turns the entire story narrative, flips the narrative around on what the AAC West is this year.
And by the way, University of Central Florida, who Navy does not play this year, boy, do they look the part so far. I mean, Dylan Gabriel has come in and been fabulous at quarterback. He's kind of, really taking the reins from Brandon Wimbush, who was the transfer coming in from Notre Dame, obviously, while Mackenzie Milton still rehabilitates. But it's been amazing what they've built there at Central Florida. I'm still not sure what the end game is for them, but boy, the Knights have been very, very impressive.
Well, I think when you have a team like Stanford come to town and you dismantle them at home in front of a national audience, I think it does sort of get people more excited about UCF than what they've been in the past, because there's always been the conversation about who have they played. And I think it does help them as an overall. You see the numbers-wise, the poll numbers go up for them with a victory over Stanford. So I think it's all good for them. The bigger picture question is, no matter who they play, right. I mean, is there any scenario that would ever get them in the playoff? And there's a lot of people that run college football that say, I don't care who they play in the non-conference. They could play Oklahoma.
And they're playing Pitt this week.
Texas, and then throw in somebody else that they're not going to let them in. I mean, I think I'm a little bit more open-minded than some people. I think they have an outside shot if they go undefeated and roll the competition. We got a long way to go before that. But I do think that victory over Stanford was probably even more impactful than their bowl victory a couple of years ago against Auburn, just from the fact that it was in a regular season game early in the season. I think while there was a week that there wasn't a ton going on in college football, that I think that garnered a lot more attention than maybe even beating Auburn in the Peach Bowl a couple of years ago.
And you know what? Give Stanford credit for taking the game, obviously, on Central Florida's home field. When we come back, quarterback injuries around the National Football League and some big ones. Dak is whacked for the Cowboys, and Lamar is going to take the Ravens far. Or at least so far, it's been good through 2 weeks. Back with the pros on the Gridiron Review. We, of course, tape this show on Mondays, and, of course, already big news around the National Football League. Before we break down the two local teams, Ben Roethlisberger done for the year with an elbow in Pittsburgh. Drew Brees tears a ligament in a thumb, minimum of 6 weeks, as he is going to have surgery. I mean, these are huge quarterback injuries. Puts Teddy Bridgewater in focus in New Orleans, and a guy that you and I talk an awful lot about on our college football podcast, It's College Football, which is available on iTunes. Mason Rudolph, all of a sudden, the man with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, and he didn't play bad in his first appearance against the Seattle Seahawks in the first game. And, Roethlisberger has been a guy that who's been banged up, it seemingly for 5 or 6 years, but always manages to play through it. Mm-hmm. Well, yesterday he tried to do it again, and then clearly he couldn't meet the level that he wants as a quarterback. So it's going to be Rudolph. When you look at the Saints, I wonder if Taysom Hill becomes, another big part of that offense. Obviously Bridgewater played yesterday, but I think both of them could play going forward.
They love the package they use Hill with.
Yeah.
They use that quite a bit.
And, a couple years ago, they thought he was going to be Brees' heir apparent. So we'll see what goes on there. But for that offense and what they do, it's a massive loss for what they want to, for Pittsburgh, it's hard to see them. You look at the AFC North, and obviously the Ravens are 2-0 at this point, but everybody else in the division, pending what the Browns do this evening against the Jets, everybody else in that division, I don't know if you have a lot of confidence in any of those teams. So when you start the season, you talk about how the teams are going to be competitive inside the AFC North. You expect the Steelers to be there. I mean, I'm not going to completely rule the Steelers out because I think Mason Rudolph's a pretty good quarterback.
And they still have a very strong running game.
Yes.
They got 3 guys that can run the football very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, Benny Snell gets his first chance the other day and puts up some yardage as well. So you can't count them out, but they've now lost Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and Ben Roethlisberger. You don't want to,
That's pretty substantial. I mean, we can talk about panic and all that other stuff, but that's pretty substantial when you think about it from a playmaking standpoint. We'll start with the Ravens. And look, I mean, you and I have talked about Lamar Jackson an awful lot in the past. People don't realize he won a Heisman Trophy basically with 1 wide receiver, a suspect offensive line, and an innate ability to know when the pocket was starting to fold up on him And I think what we've seen from Greg Roman and John Harbaugh in Baltimore is they have said, okay, here is what he does best. We're going to do exactly what he does best. We're not going to try and make him something else. They have played completely into what is in the folder for Lamar Jackson. And so far, through the 2 games this year, got a little anxious yesterday against Arizona as Kyler Murray for the 2nd straight game tried to be dramatic in that 4th quarter. But, look, I mean, as you mentioned, the North is a little suspect right now. The Ravens are sitting at 2-0. That's a great place to be right now with the way this division looks.
I mean, I think it became sort of like a funny thing to talk about him being not bad for a running back last week. But let's be honest, most everybody coming out of college thought he was a pretty good passing quarterback. I mean, it wasn't like he was
9,000 yards.
Yeah, the thing about people thinking he was a running back, I mean, it's one of those things in this era that, the minority opinion somehow blows up because of certain aspects of it, and then the person can look at that and say, take it back and rephrase it and say, oh, people are doubting me. Most people thought he was a pretty good passing quarterback coming out of college, and he threw the ball a ton at Louisville. So I don't think many people thought he was a running back, but whatever. If whatever motivates you and gets you where you need to be, that's cool. I think they've done a great job of what you mentioned, Greg Roman, and what they've done offensively. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination yesterday, but when he needed to make a play, he hit Marquise Brown when he needed to, and it's an offense that is multiple, and it's something that we haven't talked about a ton in the NFL in years past, and now you're starting to see it with Kyler Murray as well in that contest. Is you have to sort of pick your poison on who you want to stop and what you want to stop, and if you can make the passes, look, at the end of the day, the accuracy is going to be the thing that determines whether he is a Pro Bowl, Super Bowl winning quarterback, or he's just going to be a really good quarterback in the NFL. I don't think that he's going to drop out of sight, and he's going to be a guy that we're not talking about a couple years ago. But I would say that if you want to talk about what his ceiling is, the accuracy still needs to get better. I mean, I think they can contend for a Super Bowl this season, but if you want to take it to the next level, I think that accuracy will need to get better at times. But he is the one thing I've always said about him, and we've talked about it a ton. He is a streaky quarterback. Yeah. He is the type of quarterback that can go on a run and you go, that is about as good a football as I've ever seen. And then the next week it's, sort of 7 for 17 and he's trying to figure things out. I think he's a great talent. I think he's a remarkable player. I think you do have to consider that through 2 games, they haven't played the top level of competition. They get the Chiefs this weekend, and I think that's going to be it's one of those things, Pete, where I lean towards I think they're really good. But we don't know for sure, so we'll have to watch as we continue. But I think
Dolphins-Cardinals doesn't exactly make you go, wow, in terms of who they beat on the marquee.
Yeah, the Dolphins right now look really, really bad.
I mean, this might be one of the more embarrassing outfits in the history of the National Football League.
And I was talking to somebody about what the Dolphins did in the Ravens game. And the fact he couldn't believe that they stayed in man coverage for so long with Lamar Jackson and basically say, Marquise, go long and I'll throw it to you because that's one of his strong suits. So I think like I said, if you had to press me on it, I'd say I think they're really good. But let me see them against the upper echelon of the AFC. And look, as we look at the whole entire picture of the AFC right now, it's New England, it's Kansas City, and it's the Ravens. I don't know where else you're finding a team right now that you would say, because we got to see what Mason Rudolph is. You want to throw Los Angeles into the mix.
Lost 13-10, though, to Detroit yesterday.
Exactly. So
my boy Josh Allen's 2-0 with Buffalo, 2 wins in the row at the Meadowlands. So, look, I mean, there's some people that will throw in Deshaun Watson in Houston because Deshaun is playing so well, but the rest of the outfit doesn't. I mean, you got him and DeAndre Hopkins. That's it. And J.J. Watt on the defensive side.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think you can throw them in the conversation.
I mean, they beat Jacksonville yesterday 13-12. I mean, you got to execute a little bit better than that.
But I do think those 3 teams right now, if you had to press me on it, would be the 3 top teams in the AFC. And you look at what that matchup could entail between Kansas City and Baltimore. It's, I think it really lends itself to an entertaining match. But I think when you look on the depth of the AFC with the Roethlisberger injury, I think, look, the North is wide open and it looks like the Ravens should be the favorite right now. And so I think they're in a really good spot. And now you got, 2 weeks in the season. You can't get too carried away. You got to think about you know,
Hey, man, it's 2 less games you can lose. I look at it that way.
you don't want to say, oh, this is an AFC Championship Preview coming up with Kansas City, but I do think it's a good barometer to where they're at as a team, because I do think that they're a very good defensive team. Their secondary has been their strength, but they have had injuries. Jimmy Smith's had a ton in the secondary, and I don't know if they're right now an upper echelon pass rush. That would be my other question on the defensive side of the football field, but they're really, really good on defense, and this will be a big test for them against the Chiefs.
Yeah, knock on wood, Ravens fans. It looks like you may have finally cashed in on the wide receiver, Marquise Brown, at least through 2 games. Looks the part.
Yeah, I mean, I was down on the field for the preseason game against the Packers a couple weeks ago, and he was running through his pregame drills. I've never seen anybody in my life faster than Marquise Brown.
He's like a blur. We saw it at Oklahoma. I mean, there's a reason why those quarterbacks put up the numbers. Baker Mayfield probably tell you a lot of good things about Marquise Brown. Meanwhile, for the Redskins, again, moments, but not 60 minutes worth. Losing to the Eagles and the Cowboys in the first 2 games, I don't think anybody's surprised, but
No.
I don't think anybody had the Redskins winning either one of those games. But, yesterday, whereas Case Keenum was so good in the opener against the Eagles, yesterday you kind of saw the reason why Case Keenum has not been able to get into that upper crust of quarterbacks, Joe, is the fact that he was just kind of very average yesterday. Didn't make a lot of mistakes,
No.
but he didn't make a lot of plays either.
Yeah, it's sort of like the same sort of line of thinking when you look at the Ravens. We're through 2 games. They haven't played that great competition, but I think they're pretty good. The Redskins, on the flip side, have played 2 of the better teams, certainly in their division. There's no doubt about that, and 2 of the better teams in the NFC, in my opinion. And I think they're pretty bad, but I don't know for sure because of the level of competition that they've played. They have to figure out some way to move the football, running the football. We talked about it before. You got to run the football. You got to show some semblance of ability to give that chance for the defense to react to the running game. They don't have that through 2 games of the season. Keenum has done okay. He's been fine. I mean, that's what you expect out of Case Keenum at this point in his career. So you don't want to get too carried away with they're terrible. I think you have to sort of respect the opposition that they played so far after 2 games. But on the other side, I don't know how much there is to get excited about for this team.
We were supposed to be excited about their defense, and they've not been excited at all in the first 2 games. Been very disappointed by the way the defense is playing.
I think the other thing that you have to be really scared of right now, granted, once again, how many times? 2 games into the season, but my man Sweat on the outside.
What's he done?
Has looked really poor.
What's he done?
I mean, this is a guy that was unblockable at times in the SEC. I don't know if there's an injury. I don't know what's going on there, but he played a decent amount in preseason and basically wasn't a factor there. He's played 2 games, and he really hasn't been a factor in the games that he's played in the regular season as well. So if they can't get a pass rush, and you're once again relying on Ryan Kerrigan to try to get that pass rush, and Kerrigan's a good, solid football player, borderline, Pro Bowl level player, but he's not a superstar on the outside.
He can't dominate a game without some help on the other side. If you don't have to pay attention to the other side, you can chip on Kerrigan and play him with a tackle, and you can eliminate him from the game because he's not beating 2 guys.
By the way, Trent Murphy and Preston Smith had interceptions yesterday.
I saw Preston Smith intercepted Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings.
So if you're not getting the pass rush, and look, we know that the secondary is an issue with the Redskins, with Josh Norman. He's never been a cover
He's never been
island
a man guy. He's been a zone guy. Yeah, that's why he's always constantly turning around looking, hey, where's the safety at?
Yeah.
Every time.
And you don't have Dunbar on the outside as well. You need a pass rush.
The Bears have been bad on offense the first 2 games.
Yes.
If the Bears light them up next week, then you need to fire somebody.
No, I
agree. It doesn't
agree.
have to be Jay, but you got to fire somebody on the defensive staff just to get some sort of different philosophy going.
You could go the college route and bring in an analyst if you'd like. That seems like that's.
We have to find ex-head coach who's out of work, who could come in and be an analyst. We could find somebody like that out there.
But yeah, if Trubisky and the Bears go in there and score over 21 points, and then I think you're looking at a lot of issues.
Could be 0-3, Redskins fans. We could be 0-3, and then I'll keep having to hear it from my Ravens buddies, my father-in-law, Glenn Joyce, and Scotty Catterton down at Shady Side Market. The Ravens are going to keep on with that donut in the loss column. We'll see. A good one for them next week with Kansas City, as Joe said. That'll do it for us this week. Appreciate Joe sitting in for Bill Wagner. Bill will be back next week as we bring you another edition of the Gridiron Review.